right. Well, welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you here at Pride Month Book Picks. This is St. Louis County Library's Pride Month program for readers and book lovers, and we're really happy to have you here this evening. My name is Sarah. I'm an adult services librarian here at St. Louis County Library. And before we get started, I just want to run through a few different Zoom features. Okay, so just so you know, tonight's program is in a webinar format, so your camera and microphone are not active, so no one can hear you or see you, but we hope you can hear and see us, and if you can't, we suggest you either turn up the volume on your device or exit the webinar and re-enter after moving a bit closer to your Wi-Fi. We find that that usually helps. We ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentation when we will have a Q&A session. And at that time, you can use the chat function to put your questions in there, and we'll answer them towards the end. We do have the closed captions enabled. If you would like to see those, hide those, or change the font size on them, you can do that using the captions icon in your Zoom bar. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So tonight's presenters, we have KB, Alicia, and Katie Lee, and they will be presenting their book picks. And then I'm going to come on at the end and talk about some LGBTQ literary awards and a tip for how to find LGBTQ books in our catalog, kind of an easy tip. So that's what we'll be doing. The books that we'll be talking about tonight are available at the library, either in print or in e-media. So you can find them in the catalog on Hoopla, Overdrive, or in the Libby app. And if you registered today by about 1 o'clock, you may have received a handout from me in the email, and that handout, so that you don't have to take notes, you can just follow along with the handout. The handout is clickable in the PDF, so you can click on the covers and it'll take you to our catalog. It also clicks on the awards I'm going to talk about, so you can go right to the award websites. If you did not get this email, you did not get the handout in your email, if you would like it, you can put your email address into the chat box and our chat monitor will send you the handout. The chat is set to go only to the panelists, so no one else will see your email. But if you'd like the handout and you didn't get it, you can put your email in the chat box. Okay. We will go ahead and get started. I'm going to hand it over to KB, who is going to talk about some really great picks, and I'll be back a bit later. So go ahead and take it away, KB.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Sarah. I'm really excited to be part of this program tonight. So yeah, I'll get started with the books that I have picked out from our collection to share. So I have a combination of nonfiction and fiction picks, and this is one of my nonfiction picks to start off, called How to Survive a Plague by David France. So I'm not going to lie, this one's pretty hefty. It's somewhere around 600 pages and not something I would typically jump towards, something of that scale, but I loved the experience of reading this. It's a nonfiction book, and it's an account of the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the 80s. But this particular book is not just, sort of historical account of that. It's a combination of medical and epidemiological history, but also part social and political history, as well as a personal account, because the author, David France, was actually a journalist in the 80s living in New York as a gay man. So he has a lot of insight into what the world was like. And this particular book's focus is on the grassroots political organization and movement of queer people in response to AIDS, because for many years they didn't get the help and attention that they really needed. And so it's a lot about the early activists forming their own advocacy groups for funding, research, and putting pressure on those government agencies to help. It's a very inspiring read. It's extremely detailed, but not in a way that gets bogged down. It's very well written, very well researched, and it covers a lot of really seminal figures, as well as larger groups such as ACT UP that were formed in response to the AIDS crisis. So if you're any kind of history or nonfiction person, this is a great read. It's fascinating, very inspiring. There's also a documentary by the same name if you're a documentary person. So that was a really great read to get into this Pride Month for some history and inspiration. My next one is called Real Life by Brandon Taylor. And this one is, I'd call it contemporary, more literary fiction. The book follows our main character, Wallace, who is a Black Southern gay man who goes to study biology in a PhD program in a predominantly white university in the Midwest. So the story kicks off with two major sort of losses for Wallace, one of which being the death of his father. Another one is his experiment that he's working on in his lab goes awry and has possibly been, sabotaged by one of his cohort members. So that's how the novel kicks off. The whole thing takes place just over the course of a weekend or so, and it flows between flashbacks, current events, and deals with him debating whether or not to stay in the program and how to handle his sort of current sort of relationship, sort of not, with a friend of his who is still in the closet, and how that affects his life. Much of the novel is very internal and reflective reading experience, and Brandon Taylor's prose is just awesome. It's so good. It's very intimate and poignant, and the story digs into lots of themes like the relationship between internal versus external experience, racism and homophobia in the context of academia, as well as broader themes like isolation, connection, and desire. The author, Brandon Taylor, this is his first novel, and this one's from 2020. He's had a couple come out since. It's, of course, a fiction novel, but it does pull a lot from his own experience attending the Iowa Writers Workshop in Iowa City. So kind of an interesting Midwest connection there. The whole book is just so absorbing, very complex, and very tender writing. I loved the experience of reading it, and it really will pull you in, and pull you into the world of the main character. Great. So my next one is called On Earth, We're Briefly Gorgeous by the author Ocean Vuong. So this book is one of my favorites of all time. It is unlike anything I've ever read. Ocean Vuong is mostly a poet, but this is his first novel. And you can really tell in the writing style. It's so dreamy and so poetic. And the book itself is structured as a long letter from the speaker to his mother. And the speaker, the main character, is named Little Dog. And he is a gay Vietnamese man, I think in his late 20s. And the story itself is very loose and just kind of, it's not very linear. So you kind of just have to get into the rhythm of the novel itself. It's very dreamy and kind of feels like you're just sort of floating around his different trains of thoughts as he writes to his mother, who he has a very complex relationship with. And this letter is sort of a bridge between them to talk about those differences and kind of to understand each other. The story covers topics such as his life in America, flashbacks to his mother's life growing up in Vietnam, discussions of the opioid crisis and addiction, as well as a really beautiful coming of age and sort of first love story for the main character. I highly recommend this book. It's very lush. The writing is very dreamy, very poetic, as I said. And it's one of those that has just stayed with me very presently since I read it. So highly recommend this one. Okay, my next one is, I just recommend all these. That's why I picked them. So the next one is called Patsy by Nicole Dennis Benn. This is also kind of a literary fiction, character-driven story. The main character is Patsy, and she's a woman living in Jamaica, and she's raising a daughter and trying to immigrate to America for many reasons, one of which is to reconnect with her very close childhood best friend who has already moved to America, and they've kept in touch through letters, but of course they have led their different lives since then. And finally, when Patsy does learn that she has the chance to leave Jamaica for America, she learns the crushing news that she cannot bring her daughter with her. And unlike the previous book, this is a very plot-driven, very structured, almost cinematic novel. It's very fast-paced, lots of plot development, lots of action. So I don't want to spoil that for you. So that's where I'll stop with the plot. But just know that the story is very exciting. It features many journeys for all of the characters, as well as so many layers of yearning and love between the different characters. It's a great story reflecting on human nature. The writing is fantastic. This is Nicole Dennis Benn's second novel, I believe. And it's filled with just so many great characters. This is a wonderful read, and I really recommend it if you are in a book club or if you like to read books with friends, because there's a lot to discuss in it, lots of topics, lots of really interesting themes. So I would definitely recommend this for just kind of a general audience, but especially if you're part of a book club. And just as kind of a fun note, when I was researching this one, I found out that the author, Nicole Dennis Benn, married her wife in Jamaica in the first public lesbian wedding ever in Jamaica. So I thought that was pretty amazing. Okay, my next book is called The Boy with a Bird in His Chest by Emmy Lund. This one I would call a little, not quite fantasy, but definitely sort of a magical realism, fantasy tinged book. It is for adults, even though it is pretty much a coming of age story about our main character named Owen, who is the boy. And he lives in this world where certain people are born with animals sort of inside of them. It's kind of hard to describe. The author does a lot better job than I will, but essentially he's born with sort of an exposed rib cage, and in that rib cage he has a bird named Gail, who is fully a character in the book. She speaks, she has her own thoughts. It's really incredible. So that's just kind of the setup for the book. But these people that are born into this world are definitely seen as freakish, definitely ostracized, very othered, of course. And so when Owen is born, his mother is very protective of him and hides him from the world, does everything she can to hide him, keep him safe. But when that safety is jeopardized, he is faced with the decision to run into hiding with his mom or to try and find his own way in the world. And it is so beautiful. I loved reading this book. It has a lot to do with the struggle between safety and authenticity and finding your identity while remaining safe in a world that can be kind of harmful to you. So of course, it's a very good allegory for queerness, for different gender expression. It was a really great read. I believe it was also the author's debut novel. It was a very quick read and very heartwarming and tender. So this was a lovely one. Okay, and my last one is called We Are Everywhere: Protest, Power, and Pride in the History of LGBTQ+ Liberation. This book is so stunning in person. I wish I had brought a copy of it for this, but it's basically a massive kind of coffee table size book. And it has over 300 photographs in it, but it's not just a photography book. There's lots of writing in it as well. So this one is a meticulously researched account of the history of queer liberation movements, essentially really focusing on those that precede the pretty famous Stonewall riots of 1969, which took place in New York. And a lot of people see that as the beginning of modern day pride movements, but really, of course, the history of fighting for LGBT rights predates that by many years, decades. So this book really dives into all of the different histories. It's also intentionally inclusive of people from many diverse backgrounds that have fought for queer rights, and not just the, sort of white cis histories that we typically hear. The authors started as just really passionate researchers on Instagram, and they made an Instagram, I think it's just called LGBT history. But then that got so popular and they got so inundated with support and information that they decided to make this book. So it's kind of a culmination of many years of research and passion. If you're interested in history, it's a great one to pick up. Like I said, it's really beautiful in person. And if you are an ally to the LGBT community, it's a great resource for history and understanding. But if you're part of the community, I just found it so inspiring to read this. It gives you a real sense of pride and connection with the many generations of LGBT people that have come before us and fought for our rights, and made me feel really connected to that legacy that we can all be part of today. So yeah, this is a great one to pick up for Pride Month. And that is my last one. So thanks for listening, and I will hand it off to Miss Alicia.
Thanks, KB. Hi, folks. My name is Alicia. I am a self-confessed, very immersive escapist reader. All of my choices will be under the fiction umbrella. I'm really excited to start off with The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. Long Way pretty much unlocked spacey sci-fi and space operas for me. This book features a motley crew on an ugly and dilapidated ship who are assigned a mission to create a new punch to an outlying planet. Think Wormhole Highway. There's plenty of space mechanics in theory to sink your teeth into. Becky Chambers is actually a daughter of some astrophysicists. So there's a lot of real space science in there, but it's written in an approachable way that's easy to understand for space newbies and also still awesome for genre veterans. The first half or so of the book sets up the day-to-day life aboard the Wayfarer and gives a good look at everyone's relationships. And then just when you think you've heard all you can about the crew, that's when the action really starts to hit. Characters are the plot in this book, and the respective arcs are just a really great read. There's loads of queer representation in this book, both in groupings and identities. We're talking cis lesbian, pansexual, gender fluid, non-binary, trans, and more. And it's a cozy space opera. There's not really any mass murder or military structures. So if you really like those cozy reads, or you're just a fan of happily ever after fan fiction, if you fancy yourself a space science junkie, or you just want to hang out with a cool group of characters and they're good chill vibes, you'll like A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. My next book is Once in Future by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy. Once in Future was one of my first staff picks since I started at the library about 5 years ago. It's still on my list. It's classified as teen fiction, but I do think if you're an adult who likes to cross over into YA, you'll really like this one. It's an Arthurian retelling that I had never seen before when I found it. It's set in the space age future, and Ari is a female incarnation of Arthur. She takes up Excalibur against the oppressive corporate ruling empire for the good of the whole galaxy. The beginning is lightweight, a little fluffy, giving an almost false sense of security before the plot takes a really steep turn. And leaves readers with a killer cliffhanger. It's the first in a duology, so the story concludes in the sequel called Sword in the Stars. Once in Future features diversity in gender identity, gender expression, romantic identity, and relationships. Readers who enjoy strong female characters, a fantastical mega bad guy that feels all too familiar, and a healthy mix of knights, jousting, sword fights, all of that good medieval antics. Should check out Once in Future. This is one of my favorites. I was really excited to read. I think this is the first fiction that I read by authors who were queer themselves. And it kind of just opened the door. It was a really good gateway queer fiction for me. And then next, I suggest Lumberjanes by Indy Stevenson and a whole host of other authors as well. You might recognize Indy Stevenson's name. He's the creator and producer of the She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, and also the author of Nimona. If you've ever been to summer camp, or if you haven't, but you always wanted to go, you'll resonate with the setting, the characters, all the misadventures you'll see in Lumberjanes. It's a graphic novel series. I picked this one up for a former book club, and in a past life, I used to be a camp counselor, and it tickled all those memories. It was so much fun to read. It's another one that's technically classified in teen, but I think it has appeal for a variety of ages. Totally wholesome, packed with smiles and laughs. The series follows a group of campers who seem to always, despite their best effort and against their cabin leader's wishes, seem to get wrapped up in sticky situations. They soon start to uncover a lot of supernatural entities and mysteries surrounding the camp and the rival camp across the lake, which leads from one misadventure to the next. Another interesting feature about this comic series is that it rotates artists too. So every few volumes you get to see new artwork, and I thought that was kind of cool. It's kind of like official fan fiction built right into the series. If you're looking for something hilarious and heartwarming to take you away for a while, I recommend Lumberjanes. Next, I have Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Weir. This book's genre is really kind of hard to pin down. It's one that masterfully blends elements of fantasy, science fiction, and horror, which was kind of new, I think. I hadn't seen anything like this when I would research LGBT plus fiction. You probably, it blends all of those into something that would probably be called dark space opera. It's set in a world of necromantic houses in service to an absent emperor necrolord. And it starts off with Gideon, who's actually trying to pack up and leave. She's lived against her will in this nunnery, basically, and is ready to just go to the next thing, live her own life. She's tired of this. But instead, her childhood nemesis traps Gideon into entering this deadly competition where there are no rules, and the nemesis just wants to win immortality. So there's a murder mystery afoot when they get there. We know as little as Gideon as you read until she begins to uncover what's really happening behind the scenes. Considering that Gideon is an orphan with a mysterious past in a mysterious order that keeps secrets for a mysterious immortal emperor, you just know that there's going to be shenanigans everywhere. It was hilarious and dark and fun. It was a great read. Fans of narrative voice will enjoy Gideon's snarky attitude and sardonic sense of humor. It leaves off the page, and the dialogue is a bit anachronistic, i.e. it's millennial as all get out, but it's exactly why it works so well, tempering the book's kind of darker themes. Gideon the Ninth is great if you're looking for something just wonderfully genre bending with plot twists, unassuming depth, romance, and just an unforgettable cast of weirdos. Next, I have Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. In Cemetery Boys, transgender Yadriel just wants to be accepted as his true self by his traditional Latinx family. Yadriel's family are a long line of brujos who were granted magic and serve Lady Death by healing the living, which is done by the women in the family, and guiding spirits to the afterlife, which, you guessed it, was done by the men. When his cousin Miguel dies suddenly, Yadriel sees an opportunity to both help his grieving family and prove his gender all at once. So with the help of his best friend and other cousin Maritza, Yadriel performs the induction ceremony for himself and finds to find Miguel's spirit and set it free. But of course, it doesn't happen that way. It's not that easy. Instead, Yadriel accidentally summons the spirit of the school bad boy and classmate Julian, who doesn't know how or why he's dead. So all these sort of secrets unravel as Yadriel and Julian are unexpectedly tangled together, trying to solve these mysteries. Cemetery Boys is just such a joyous and spooky celebration of queer love, diversity, and culture. And it takes place from Halloween and really leads the families gearing up for Dia de Muertos, sorry. So it's a seasonal, it's very immersive in the holiday, and you get all of the elements of marigolds and the offerings, and it's stunning, gorgeous imagery. This murder mystery paranormal fantasy is funny, heartfelt, intense, a little scary, and fast-paced from start to finish. It is incredible, and it was the best book I think I've ever read for book club. It was amazing. Highly recommend. And then my last one is The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. Aharanya was once an independent country and is now subjugated by the empire of Parijatwipa. I'm going to butcher these names. Magical storytelling, though. It's an India-based world-building fantasy. Malini is the emperor's sister, imprisoned at the top of the Harana temple, which are ruins now and were once home to powerful magic users. Long since abandoned, and the temple children and elders were burned a long time ago. Priya is a servant in the city and is assigned to attend the princess's chambers, making this dangerous climb to the top of the temple every night. Priya wasn't always a servant. Secretly, she was a temple child of Harana before it was burned. She's one of the last surviving, and it's a terrible secret she has to keep. Fortunately, she doesn't have a lot of memories of her childhood to begin with, and that helps her keep that secret until Malini witnesses Priya's magic in a fight from an intruder, and the two are kind of thrown together into a reluctant, sometimes combative alliance that slowly becomes a partnership. And it's a really good, really funny connection. The Jasmine Throne deals with power and its costs, the nature of empires and the consequences for the subjugated, the choices one makes and those that are denied, what one is willing to destroy and what they'll give almost anything to protect. Along with power, this book also concerns with trust, with love and all of love's painful and complicated glory, and ultimately with family. An intense first part to a trilogy. Readers will be left gobsmacked, a little awestruck, violently satisfied and painfully engaged. With that, I pass the mic to Katie Lee.
Hi, I'm Katie, and the first book that I'm going to talk about is The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. I like to describe it as kind of an unsettling dream of a book. It's set under the guise of a summer camp, and it's an atmospheric horror that introduces tension and holds the reader until the last page. It stars Mars, a gender fluid individual using he, him pronouns. He was once inseparable from his twin sister before she became very distant and then spent her time in the splendor of a summer retreat called Aspen Conservancy Summer Academy, which is very fancy. But when his sister Caroline dies under suspicious and horrific circumstances, Mars is determined to discover as much about his sister's life as he can. He attends the academy in her place and finds a wickedly dark atmosphere covered by folksy charm. He can feel that there's something slightly sinister about the place, but he goes on, and in order to connect to his past sister, he finds her friend group and tries to connect with them. And this friend group they're your typical popular girls. They're stereotypical popular ladies from high school. And they've named themselves the Honeys after the beehives that they maintain behind their cabin. That's like their job there. And Mars is positive that these girls have something to do with his sister's death. But the more time he spends at the camp, the more Mars kind of starts to lose his grasp on his memories, and nothing really is as it seems anymore. So really the book is about how he needs to try and figure out the camps and the honey's secrets pretty quickly in order to get out while he still can. This book kept me completely entranced the whole way through. So if you like horror and queer YA, this is definitely the book for you. I would say it definitely has adult appeal. It's not, the characters aren't too high schooly. They feel very much older in that sense. Content warnings for this book include death, body horror, and there is some homophobia and past SA mention. And that brings me to my next book, which is another horror novel, House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. This is an adult novel, and it is dark and gothic horror. And I would say there's secrets around every corner, that type of book. And there's just like this brutal sapphic romance that it made the pages fly by, and I really didn't want this book to end. It follows Marion Shaw, a woman who has been raised in the slums and longs to leave the city and its people behind. She really wants to get out of where she is. She lives in a world that really, really treats the poor terribly. She has to work just all the time. She has very short breaks. And it's just constant on her feet. And so she's really looking for any opportunity at all to get out. And that opportunity comes in the form of a really peculiar listing in the newspaper, which seeks a blood maid. And it says, I like the listing. It says, wanted blood maid of exceptional taste, must have a keen proclivity for life's finer pleasures. Girls of weak will need not apply. And Marion really does know that she's strong and brave enough to be able to do anything, as long as she can get out of where she's living right now. So her only chance to really ever get out of where she is and her social standing is to apply. And she soon finds herself whisked away to the very far north. And this is a completely different world than what she's left. The nobles all live in luxury, and the people that live around nobles also live in luxury, and their blood is like a very powerful kind of elixir. So basically the wealthy drink blood of those in their service. And Marion signed on to be the newest blood maid for the House of Hunger, title of the book, where Countess Elizabeth is covered in just this hazy secrecy and mysterious illness that plagues her. She's very loved by her people, but also incredibly feared. And I think most people try and hide their fear during this book, but you can kind of see it creeping in. And when this countess takes a particular liking to Marion, the new blood maid, Marion is eager to please. And it really just is, I'd say about half the book is about Marion and their relationship together, but how the countess really has a lot of secrets, and they're very dark, and maybe this relationship is not meant to be. I really flew through the pages of this one. Content warnings are blood, gore, death, and some emotional abuse. So it's definitely not for the light of heart, but I really did enjoy it. That brings me to my next book, and I'm going to step away from the dark and gloom and move into romantic comedy. It has a sci-fi twist, One Last Stop, by Casey McQuiston. It really is, I think of it as just absolute magic. With it, it has excellent prose, lots of wit, dreamy romance. It's charming and clever, and in it, a young woman falls in love with a girl who is lost in time and trapped on a New York subway. This is one of my favorite books, I think, in the last couple of years, which is high praise, I would say. It stars August Landry, and she really is quite cynical. She is a 23-year-old trying to put her past and her amateur sleuth mother behind her. She's trying to get away from it all. She's a minimalist by necessity and a loner by choice. And that is until she moves in with a group of wonderfully weird roommates. And it turns out to be just exactly what she needs. Nico, a trans psychic and terrible bartender, is one of those roommates. We have his girlfriend Mila, who's a queer Black sculptor, and she has an electrical engineering degree. Wes, a gay broody tattoo artist with an adorable dog, and I like dogs, so I had to mention that. And the group's neighbor Isaiah is also a very important part of their little found family. He's an accountant and quite the incredible drag queen. And this group of broke 20-somethings are really perfect together. And they become this eccentric found family that just opens up and lets August in with open arms. And so half the book is really about finding each other in this family type way. And then half the book is also about August getting on to a subway and discovering this mysterious girl with cassette tapes and a leather jacket. And she just thinks she's so cool. But it turns out she's lost in time from the 1970s and she's stuck just traveling on the Q train, kind of in a time loop almost. And August really has to come to terms with her past and learn the very cheesy power of friendship, and kind of just like learn to follow her heart in order to save Jane from this time loop. And there's a lot of gritty realness to Jane and August's relationship and a little bit of spice. And the author McQuiston, who's one of my favorites, manages to introduce all these things while the romance completely unfolds just on the subway. And I think that's a really interesting way to have that romance set and be stuck there. It was just phenomenal. And content warnings for that include sexual content, homophobia, and some racism. And that brings me on to the next book, which is completely different from the others. This is high fantasy, and it is an over 800 pages monster of a book, but I really did fly through this one. It's not as intimidating as it looks. It is Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, and it's this complex work. It really is just like a work of art, and it is a story that twists and weaves with an intense emotional undertone, I would say. It alternates between 4 perspectives and spans several continents in this made-up world. Its characters fear the return of a great and powerful enemy called the Nameless One. In the West, Queen Sabran, Gideon the Ninth of Ines, which is quite the title. She's without an heir and is told she must conceive a daughter to protect her queendom, because it might get destroyed by enemies if there is no queen. So in order to escape life married to a man that she does not want, she has longed for this cure for mortality. She wants to be immortal, and she exiles those who she's brought in, and then they have failed to come up with like an elixir for immortal life. And one of these people is Nicholas Roos. He is an alchemist, and he could not succeed. And she sent him to this place called Hiroshima, which is a prison island, and he there becomes mixed up with a lot of plots outside of his control, but most of them endanger Sabran, the queen, who he's quite mad at, so he's not really sorry that it's endangering her. And then another perspective is Ia Duran, and she is a lady in waiting for the queen, but still is seen as somewhat like of an outsider at court. She has traveled to Innis to protect the queen, from those who wish to harm her, and the queendom itself. It really just is the queendom itself that she's protecting, because she doesn't want other people to come in and take that country. What's really fascinating about Ied is she's actually loyal to a secret society of mages, and she has to keep her magic buried, even as feelings begin to develop between herself and the queen. And then the last perspective is way far away across the ocean in the east. We have Tane, and she's a dragon rider. And the other perspectives, they're all afraid of dragons. They think of them as the enemy, but Tane is, she loves dragons, and dragons are kind of, they're heroes to her and her people. And this woman begins to take a lot of risks that she never thought she would. And then when a stranger turns up on the beach, that really does threaten everything she's worked for. And all these plot lines intersect and weave, and make a really fascinating, amazing book. There's so much more to it, but I'll leave it at that. Shannon's writing is really descriptive and complex, and it hints at like fairy tales and mythology, and some British literature. Content warnings include miscarriage, death, and violence. I'm sure there's a couple more, but they're not as big in there. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Mistakes Were Made by Meryl Wilsner. I love this author. She's written 2 books by now, and this is her second. And it's honestly, it's just delightfully witty and fast-paced and full of spice, and the characters have so much chemistry, and I flew through it. It stars Cassie Klein, a slightly rough around the edges 20-something who finds herself in a whirlwind and secretive romance. She goes to a bar in order to get away from family weekend festivities on campus because she has issues with her family, and she meets this beautiful stranger, Erin Bennett. And after one amazing night together, disaster happens when the next morning her best friend, Cassie's best friend, drags her to brunch, and they meet her mom there, who happens to be Erin Bennett. And their chemistry continues to spark throughout this book, as what was supposed to be just like a one-night thing becomes something entirely too real for both of them. Neither one are really ready for a relationship. But they kind of have to learn to do that because they realize they have too much, they just like each other too much, essentially. There is a large age gap between the main couple, but it's not viewed as something that's uncomfortable, and it's not really a big hurdle between them and their relationship and happily ever after. Really, their big hurdle is that best friend / daughter that they are keeping everything a secret from. And I flew through these pages, cheered as they both work towards happiness and finding themselves. It was a very excellent rom-com. Definitely recommend if you like romances. Content warnings, sexual content, and alcohol. And the last book I'm going to talk about is actually a really new release. I think it was released last week, Mortal Follies by Alexis Hall. Alexis Hall writes a lot of queer romance and has a really good series going on with a lot of transgender characters set in Regency times, and they're all very good. I recommend them all, but This one is definitely a step away from their other stuff. I loved it. It's fantasy, romance, and then there's some historical bits in there and a little bit of retelling. So it's really like a lot of things thrown together. And it's set in like 1814, I think. And we have our main character, Meles Mitchellmore, and she finds herself ready to enter high society. And she's hindered by this curse that's put on her. And this world that she's in isn't your typical 1814 place, because it's also filled with fairies and spirits and deities and sorcerers. So a curse really isn't out of the norm here. Almost scandal begins to follow Meles everywhere because of this curse, and it starts with a really actually quite funny scene as her dress slowly starts to unmake itself over the course of an evening at a very, very high profile ball. And as this curse really starts to do more damage, she seeks out the help of someone she's met before and really isn't received well by other people in society, someone named Lady Georgiana Landrake. And this woman is brooding, and she is also given the nickname Duke of Annandale. She's rumored by everyone to be an enchantress and possibly has murdered some people, though that's just rumor. And Georgiana is really exactly what Meles needs to try and break this curse and maybe find a happily ever after. So what I think is really weird and interesting about this book is that it's narrated by Puck, which is Shakespeare's famous character from A Midsummer Night's Dream. He is hilarious as a narrator. He puts a lot of his own commentary into the story, lots of snarky comebacks, and this is just a really great sapphic fantasy with a Regency twist full of magic, and I absolutely loved it. Content warnings include there's animal death, murder, and some transphobia. Thank you for listening. I'm gonna hand it back to Sarah now.
Thank you, Katie. All right, thank you to all of you presenters. We had some really good ones. I did notice that several of the picks we have available as book discussion kits. KB mentioned that Patsy is a particularly good pick, so I did put those in the chat and a link to our book discussion kit reservation platform in the chat. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some LGBTQ plus literary awards. So just in case you didn't get enough picks, we have some more for you from these different literary awards. So the first one I'd like to talk about are the Stonewall Book Awards. They are sponsored by the American Library Association's Rainbow Roundtable and are one of the oldest and longest running awards for LGBTQ literature. The first award in 1971 was given to Patience and Sarah by Isabel Miller, and there are now 3 awards given each year. The Barbara Giddings Literature Award for Adult Literature, which is often for fiction, the Israel Fishman Nonfiction Award for Adult Nonfiction titles, and the Mike Morgan and Larry Roman's Children's and Young Adult Literature Award. So, for example, some of last year's winners included Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon, which I really liked. Dear Santhurin, a Black Spirit Memoir by Akweke Amizi, Too Bright to See by Kyle Lukoff, and Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. So they have all of their winners up on the website going all the way back to 1971. So there are plenty of great reading ideas there. Okay, the next award I'd like to talk about is the Lambda Literary Awards, often called the Lammies by people in the know. This one started in 1989. They have many award categories every year. They're separated out by like sexual orientation, gender identity, literary genre, etc. So for example, last year's lesbian fiction winner was Gods of Want by Ming Chang. The gay romance winner was I'm So Not Over You by Kosoko Jackson. And the LGBTQ plus mystery winner was Dirt Creek by Haley Scrivener. So like there's just a ton of awards, so lots to pick from. They have a spreadsheet on their website with all of their winners going all the way back to the beginning. So again, there's just like a ton of great suggestions to look into there. And then the last award I want to talk about are the Publishing Triangle Awards. So the Publishing Triangle is the Association of LGBTQ people in the publishing industry. And they too started their award in 1989. They have 10 different categories that focus on different identity genres as well as career stages. So like they have an award for debut work, emerging author, lifetime achievement, etc. So by clicking through to each award, you can see the winners going all the way back to the establishment of that category. Not all of them go quite as far back to 1989, but still many ideas to choose from. And again, I mentioned that handout at the beginning. I do have the links to these different awards on the handout. So if you click on the award image, it'll take you to the award website. And then the last thing we wanted to do is give you a little tip about finding LGBTQ plus books in our catalog. So yeah, most of our LGBTQ books, I don't want to say all but the vast majority of them are tagged with this little icon that you see here that I've circled in red on the catalog screenshot of Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey, which I really like and recommend. Yeah, they're tagged with this little icon, which is hyperlinked. So you can approach this from a couple different ways. You can do a keyword search for open bracket LGBTQ plus close bracket in the search bar on the catalog. Or if you see this little icon on a book that you've read and enjoyed in the catalog, you can click on it and it's going to take you to all of the other LGBTQ plus books in our catalog. So it's kind of a nice way to browse them. Our new catalog does allow us to have tags on a variety of different types of books to help you connect with similar ones. So we sometimes have tags for different subjects, series names, publishers, etc. So yeah, we hope that this adds to your discovery of books that you will like. We're about to have our Q&A. I'm going to talk about a couple of other wrap-up things before we go to the Q&A. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to put those into the chat box now, and we will answer them during our Q&A session. But I do want to tell you about a couple of things coming up at the library. So first, if you did not get enough recommendations or you want ones that are personalized just to you, you can fill out our personalized reading list form. This is a form on our website where you can tell us what you like and what you don't like. And within a week, we will send you a list of 5 titles that we've created just for you that we think that you will enjoy. You can find it on the website under the Books, e-Media, and More tab. And then I wanted to draw your attention to a couple of adult virtual programs that we have coming up. So this is Pride Month. We have a whole bunch of both in-person and virtual Pride programs. And one that seemed really interesting and useful to me that we have coming up is about finding grant funding for LGBTQIA small businesses and nonprofits. That's coming up on Thursday, June 22nd at 10 a.m. And then we've started Summer Reading Club. So Summer Reading Club is not just for kids, it's for adults too. So we hope that you will sign up and start logging and earning for your reading this summer. But we have a Summer Reading Club program for book lovers coming up in July. Books Bring Us Together on Wednesday, July 12th at 7 p.m., where we will have some of our library book group leaders talking about books that they think would make good book group picks or be good community building picks or picks that you might want to share with friends and family. So we hope that you will join us at that or another event, which you can find on our events calendar. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to questions. I think I'm going to go and stop sharing my screen. And if all of the presenters would like to turn on their cameras and microphones, I'll put us into gallery mode and we can see if there are any questions. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. Let's see here. So the first question, I see it here. Okay, so I have one question for you to start it off. How do you all find out about the books? I know you're all big readers and you all had some really great picks. So how do you find out about books, especially LGBTQ books, but really any books that you like? What are some of the sources that you go to find good things to read?
I can start us off.
Yeah.
I usually find my picks on Book Riot, and I also cross-reference and find new things on Goodreads as well. Book Riot and Goodreads.
I also use Goodreads quite a bit, and then I also have been using this new one, similar book app called the Story Graph. So I've been using that quite a bit as well, and then I am on Instagram a lot, and I find out about new books there.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar. I love on Instagram and even TikTok, especially if you have an author that you really like their books, you like their style and they're writing right now, they're typically connected with other authors in the community. So I've found, kind of like a spider web effect of like, if I like your book, then maybe somebody either promoted another author they like, or even like blurbed, a new book. So that's kind of a good way to sort of like follow a trail of suggestions, I guess. Yeah. But Goodreads is great. Yeah. Social media is great.
I really like Book Riot too. Yeah, it's a really fun website with good book picks and like information about the book industry and that kind of things. So I really like Book Riot. And then I will give a shout out to our database Novelist, which is a database that we have that is quite powerful, and it can be a little complex for a new user to use, but it's a database that is focused just on connecting readers with books. And I did do a little tutorial on some of its basic functions on a program that I did in April called Spring Into Reading, where I also talked about getting over like reading ruts and book reading blocks. So if you do want to watch that, it is on our YouTube channel under the staff book picks playlist. I did it back in April, so you can find that. But yeah, Novelist. Yeah, see, we have a couple of, someone else is in the chat says that they recommend Book Riot too. A couple of you said that you use Goodreads, and we have a question about how you use Goodreads because this person says it seems like a tsunami of information. So how do you kind of pare it down, or how do you focus on it to find the things that you really like?
I'll start it off. I have a lot of friends on there that I get recommendations from. But if that's not something that you like to do, the social aspect, Goodreads has like a ton of lists that people have curated, and I think you can get to that from the browse menu and just go to lists, and then they have tons of different genres, or you can type in like a tag. So I think there's several tags for different LGBTQ plus things, as well as just many other genres and subgenres and all that kind of stuff.
Backpacking off of Katie, I will go down a rabbit hole of tags. Like I'll start off on a list sometimes. I'll find one that I like because the commenter's right. The person with the question, it can be very overwhelming. See a tag that I'm curious about, find another book, find a tag I'm curious about. I'll also start off with a book that I just enjoyed and look at the tags the same way and connect to new titles.
Well, thank you. Let's see. I don't see any other questions right now, but if anyone else has a question, please put it in the chat. But I did want to ask you all, not to put you on the spot, but are you reading anything good right now?
Yes, I am reading a book actually by Meryl Wilsner, one of the authors I talked about. She has a new book coming out in September called Cleat Cute. It is very much like her other books. It's cute romantic comedy, and it's a sapphic soccer romance, and it's really good so far. I'm someone who reads 2 books at once, so I'm also reading a book that is out right now. It is a nonfiction, what is it called? It Came from the Closet, and it's a book, it's an anthology of a bunch of essays about queerness and horror from a bunch of different authors, and it's really, really good.
I started reading that one recently too. Yeah, I read Carmen Maria Machado's essay in there on I think Jennifer's Body. I think that's the book that it's so good. I'm reading a very Pride Month feeling book. So I've been a big fan of the group Tegan and Sarah my whole life. And they've written a couple books now. They have one on their high school experience, and then one just came out on their junior high experience. And it's a graphic novel illustrated by Tilly Walden, who is a gay comic artist. And so it's just like, selfishly, I'm like, this book was made for me. I love everything about it. So that's been really fun to read that this month.
I have to say, I love Tegan and Sarah. I just want to say that right now.
Yeah.
And for a long time, and they have very specific songs that take me back to like my late 20s, a long time ago. So anyway, yeah. Tegan and Sarah.
You should check it out. It's really cute.
Call back to KB, you'd mentioned TikTok on how you find books. My current read is Legends and Lattes, which is viral on TikTok.
I love Legends and Lattes. That was one of my 2 favorite books. That was like one of my favorite books last year. I did that in the SLCL staff picks that we did like back in favorite books of 2020. I like that book. And I will tell you, because we talked about this at Lit Lovers, which we had as an in-person program. So maybe some of you who are watching this virtually didn't come to Lit Lovers. But they are coming out with, well, it's actually a prequel to Legends and Lattes in November. It's called Bone Dust and Bookshops and Bone Dust. One of the 2. Yeah. So November.
Nice.
Be excited. Let's see. Looking on, someone does say that they're on hold for the graphic novel by Tegan and Sarah too, and they also like Legends and Lattes. So someone asked about how to find very adult books on the library site. So there aren't really great ways to do that like through the library catalog, but I'm going to say that another shout out for the Novelist database. The Novelist database does categorize their romances by heat level. So you can go all the way from chaste romances all the way up to explicit with some categories in the middle. So another kind of, it is kind of a complex database to like get into, but that is a really good way to find romances, not just very adult romances, but like of any category. So if you have sort of a sweet spot for your romances in its steaminess level, I definitely recommend Novelist. And similarly for books like that have a lot of violence, like it will tag them with like violence, gritty, menacing, these sort of keywords, so that you can kind of tell. So in the adult violence sort of category as well, you can kind of see that. So so I would, if you have tastes in that way, look towards Novelist as opposed to trying to do a keyword search in our catalog. Let's see. Well, I don't see any other questions, and we're just after 8 o'clock. So I think we will go ahead and leave it there. So thank you so much to the presenters for presenting tonight. You did a really great job and a lot of really great picks. I hope that everyone will sign up for Summer Reading Club and that you attend another Pride Month program. And we hope to see you at another program soon. I will leave the program running for just a few minutes after we all leave in case you want to click on that book discussion kits link. But other than that, we will see you again next time. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.